working. All right, so I'm going to get started here. I think the mic is a little bit too loud, so I'm going to turn it down just a little bit. So what we'll do today is kind of a continuation of what we did last time. I hope you guys got some idea of what kind of files you can include into your app. So last time we talked about how you can use a text file to encode JSON, so you can have a file that you can use to pre-initialize some kind of data structure in your project. You can use bitmaps, so they're great for logos and very simple animations. We can do other types of animation using what we call a canvas, but we'll talk about that later. We can include audio files, so for whatever reason, if your app, okay, my amplifier mic just died, the battery. That's okay, that's why we got rechargeable batteries. And you have no idea for how long I have asked for these rechargeable batteries, and they kept saying, nah, it's not a good idea. They got stolen. People do not understand how to use rechargeable batteries. Yeah, that's what I got, as reasons of not to have rechargeable batteries. Yeah. Well, so I bought my own setup. So these are my own batteries and my own charger that I put here, and also in the next classroom, because I just couldn't stand having to use, alkaline batteries, and there's no telling whether there are any spare batteries too. So with this, I have one set in the mic and one set being charged, and so we're always ready to go. Anyway, we also talked about how to make your own audio files. So you can use LMMS to create your own music. Okay, so if you have, if you yourself know how to compose or transpose music, or if you know someone who can do that, LMMS is a great free tool. Okay, so you can actually compose your own little jingle or whatever you want. It has a lot of instruments built in. You can also extend what they call the sound font library, so you can actually include more and more sound effects if you want to. Audacity, on the other hand, is more of a recording and mixing tool, so you can actually create your own track if you want to. But it's also great for processing stuff like removing noise, stretching out, compressing and stuff like that. So Audacity and LMMS are two entirely different kind of tools, but both can be quite useful when you want to create your own audio files. Now, video files, I don't need to say too much about it. Okay, you can use a phone to record like a short video clip, upload the video clip into your App Inventor application, and then use it as a splash screen if that is what you want to do. But if it is a larger file, it is best to leave it on a server somewhere, like YouTube, so that you don't have to put in too much stuff into your APK file. All right. So are there any questions about resources as files in your app? No questions? Oh, the other thing is I extended the deadline of the semester project document to the end of today. So if you have not turned it in yet, turn it in by the end of today. If you have turned it already, it's all good. Okay? All right? If you have any questions about your own project and you want to kind of bring it up in the class, we can talk about it too. All right. So now we're moving on to Web Access API and Mini Browser, okay, which is kind of interesting. We'll start with the first one, a mini web browser, which is what we call the WebKit. So basically, App Inventor has a component called I cannot remember. I think it's a web viewer. That's it. Okay, so in App Inventor, it's called a web viewer. It's basically a miniature browser. Okay, not full function, but nonetheless, it is actually quite capable. You can include that as a visual component in your app. So this way, if you have any type of content that you think, well, I need to update this like all the time, okay? So instead of having that data actually built into the app itself, you can make it, you can host it somewhere on the website, and then have your web browser to refer to that website when you need to. Okay, so the first thing we'll do today is to illustrate how to do it and how to do it for free. So because you can get a Google site account for free, okay, your school account probably has that capability. I'm not 100% sure, but if you have a third-party Google Gmail account that is not affiliated with the school, you can definitely have a site presence. And in this case, you don't need to register domain names either, because you can just deal with a longer URL. So this is what the first thing we'll do first, okay? Because it does give your app a lot of interesting resources that otherwise would be kind of difficult.
Would you want to create have a plugin for like a web that you made, so you can kind of treat it as a database or source or something?
This one is more like for display purposes. It's not for data purposes.
Okay.
Let me illustrate first, okay? If you got any questions, then we can go ahead and answer those questions. Okay. All right. So, for instance, okay. So in this MindDefrag, app here, okay. Let's say we want to add a scene or add a screen. Okay. We gotta select filling, and we'll add one more screen. Okay. So this screen is called. Now remember, you cannot change the name of the screen afterwards, so it's best to kind of make sure that you got the right name to begin with. So we'll say web resources, okay? And then what we'll do is to illustrate how to use that. So what you do is you go under the user interface category and drag and drop a web viewer component into your screen. And you can see that it doesn't seem to do much, okay, because it really is just a miniature browser inside your own screen. But it doesn't have the usual browser like bookmark stuff, so it's not full function like a real browser, but it does, get, browsing done and stuff like that. So we'll just kind of drag it here. And in the component or in the properties tab, you can see you can control the height, the width, but most importantly, you can control also the home URL. The home URL is programmable. In other words, you can use your code to specify where on the internet to go to, the actual URL. But it's also, you can also set this as a default, so when the page displays, it automatically goes to that page, which is kind of handy.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of games now, where they're just inside the game, you can go straight to the website without
Yeah.
leaving the game.
Yeah. Yeah, because they want to do it that way, because this way the dynamic content doesn't need to be included in the app itself, and they can do updates like this, on the website, without having to push the newer version of the app again and again and again. So that's kind of cool. If you click this use this location, I think it will have the ability to report your GPS location to the website if the website is asking for it. Prompt for permission. I think, okay, okay, we can actually just look at the documentation here, because there's no way I can actually remember the documentation of everything in here. All right, so more information. There we go. So we look at the properties, follow links, determine whether to follow links when they're tapped in the web viewer. So you can turn it off. Okay, so instead of making this an actual web browser, you can turn off, follow links. So this way, it becomes kind of more of a static page, and people cannot leave that page. If you want people to stay on the page but not be able to leave the page, you can basically turn off follow links. Height, we know what that is. Home URL, we know what that is. Ignore SSL error. Set to true to ignore errors. Use this to accept self-signed certificates from websites. I advise that you do not turn this on because self-signed certificates from websites can be an indication of a man-in-the-middle attack. Okay. Now, on the other hand, if you set the URL and you basically say that this is my own web page and it's all good, you can turn it on. Okay, but just in general, especially ignore SSL error and follow and links, they should not be both on. Because when they're both on, it's just kind of asking for trouble. Having only one of them on is okay, but having both on is not. Okay, this is the reason why we are on this page. Prompt for permission. If true, then prompt the user of the web view to give permission to access the geolocation API. If false, then assume permission is granted. Which basically means,
For the
the next line, exactly. Yep, designer only. Whether or not to give the application permission to use the JavaScript geolocation API, this property is available only in the designer. So it cannot be accessed in the program block itself.
unless it's already been given permission. So you need both on to
Yeah.
be able to get location.
Yep, to use the API in JavaScript, right? Visible, you can turn it on and off. Okay, so let's go for the simple stuff first, okay? The first one is, how do I get my Google Sites? How do I get my web page on the web so my app can refer to it? All right, so what we'll do is we'll go to a place where we should be fairly familiar with. Okay, so yours may look a little bit differently because you may not have some of the extra components, but yeah,
I'm just really surprised you can even turn those off.
turn what off?
Like skipping the SSL or the asking permission for geolocation. Like I would think those are like
Well, unless when you installed the app and gave it, and you already gave it permission to use the location, it's gonna assume it works or that it's allowed, even though it's not, and it just won't do anything like proper. Like if you're on your actual phone, you want that prompt to show up because most people by default aren't given permission, to the app.
All right. So if you go to your Google Drive in apps.losrios.edu and click on the Google Apps icon, which is what I'm doing right here, go down, click More, and then click More from G Suite Marketplace. That doesn't sound right to me. It should be one of these links here. Okay, let me try that one more time. I'm looking for sites. So, oh, right there. Okay, I missed it the first time. Okay, so I think as student accounts, you can actually create your sites too, but just keep in mind that if you're not enrolled in a semester, you may lose access to your sites. Okay, so you might want to do this if you want your app to be usable after you like exit this class or after you are no longer a student here. You might want to do it with your regular Gmail account, which is also free. Okay, so I'm just using this as an example. Okay. All right, so you can turn on. So go to create, and you can say in classic sites, in new sites. Okay, we'll say new sites. Okay, and just think of a name. Okay. Now there are several configurations here that are kind of interesting. So the first thing is you might want to choose a name for your site, even though it's not going to be the URL to match your app here. So I'm going to have mine defrag as the name of the site. Your main page doesn't really matter because you can create sub pages that you want to use. But there are certain settings that are kind of important. Let me go to the duplicate site, publish. Okay, where are the settings? This is where you can insert additional components into this page. So I'm going to create a new page here. Click the plus sign to create a new page. And the new page is mine defrag web resources. And I think you can have spaces for the name itself. And then click on advanced. Oh, it's all grayed out. I wonder why it's grayed out. What I want to show you is there's an option to make your page mobile friendly. So it doesn't so it would readjust everything to fit on a smaller screen. And that's what we want. Click here. It doesn't seem to give me Give me here. Nope, doesn't. Oh, there we go. Okay, properties. Nope, that doesn't give me a whole lot of extra stuff to do. Duplicate site. Nope. That is preview and preview inside the mobile. So it still looks good. Okay, so maybe that option is turned on automatically. So you can change the screen layout, to whatever you want, and then you can also insert a variety of items here. So in a certain way, this is kind of more flexible than App Inventor itself, because if you want to embed a YouTube video, you can just drag and drop it here if you know which one you want. You can also include maps, you can include a calendar and stuff like that. So this is a really interesting way to get around certain limitations of App Inventor, is to make your resources web-based instead of app-based. Okay? Are there any questions about this part? No? Okay. So we'll just go ahead and say, okay, this is the page that I want. And I'm going to click publish here. And yeah, so just read this part here. Anyone at Los Rios Community College District manage. Okay, and I don't think I can change that. Share with others. Can view. Okay. All right, so we can publish this. And then after you publish, you can turn this into a different mode. Okay, view publish site, which is kind of important because you want to get the URL to that page. There we go. All right. So you can now click on this link here, and then just copy and paste it into the web view component. So copy this, go back to App Inventor, which is here, and then paste it into home URL. Now I think the auth user equals 1, you don't need this part, because that indicates that it's already authenticated, which to most other people is not going to be the case. So get rid of this part here, and then we'll just say okay for the rest. And that would be my web resources page here. And if you want it to look even better, you can go back to the screen and then turn off its own title. So there's a bar here. Turn off the title visibility. You can even turn off status bar, which is not recommended. Unless you have a very specific reason to turn off the status bar, don't turn it off. All right, so we got everything set up here. And now the only thing we have to do is to go back to screen 1 or some other screen so that we have a way to trigger that screen. So we got one continue button here. We can just kind of reprogram the continue button to go to that screen. So go to blocks. And this time we don't want to go to this screen anymore. And remember, spelling is important, okay? So you have to spell the screen name exactly the way it's supposed to be. And this one is screen web resources. So you have to spell here, screen web resources. There we go. So now the app is ready to go. And I got my $75 Samsung phone here. And to debug any type of app that has multiple screens, the only practical way to do it is to download the APK. So if you use any one of the connect methods right here, they don't work very well because they would switch the screen as soon as you switch the screen in App Inventor. So you have to go to build. Save APK, which is the most reliable way, even though it involves the use of command line commands. It's once you get used to it, it's not too big of a deal. Okay. Okay, I'm waiting for the APK. There we go. And then on the command line, okay, I got a whole bunch of command lines, but they're not in the screen area that we can see. So we'll move it here. There we go. All right. So I'm going to first change directory to where. Oh, I need to turn on the screen first. So screen copy first, so that you can see what the tablet is seeing or what my phone is seeing. There we go. And then the second thing that we need to do is to go to a folder where ADB is installed. So that one depends on your particular installation. In mine, it is in Android, SDK, Platform Tools, because I have Android Studio already installed, and that's why I go here. But in your case, it depends on what your software is installed. So here's ADB. So I can now say ADB install -R for reinstall if it is already installed. And then the folder is temp. This is where I saved the file. And then mind defrag is the name of the APK. So just run it. And it's installed. Now I go to my phone. Okay, click on the phone so you can see what I'm seeing here. All right. And go to apps, mind defrag. Okay. Uh-oh, what just happened? It died on me. Okay. It is not showing the screen. Okay. I'm just trying to show you what I'm seeing in the screen. And there are no devices. Okay, so that's why. Okay, now it has the device. Let's do it one more time. There we go. All right, so I go to mind defrag and then go to continue. Could not be loaded because internet. Oh, okay, that's why. Because I haven't set up the internet connection on this computer yet. Okay, let me fix that. So go to connection. RCCD. I might be using the wrong authentication thing. Okay, let me do it one more time. Yeah, it has to be MS Chap V2. No certificates. Oh, I forgot to give it a password. That's why. And of course, for that part, you cannot see it. Okay, connected. Excellent. Okay, now we can do it. So this is, I just illustrated one kind of, drawback of this method is if your phone is not online, it won't work. So if I do it again, it will work because it's just reloading the page. Oh, it wants me to sign in again because, um, because of the URL. The URL, specifies certain things. Okay, let me go back to here. So I copy this URL, but that's probably not what I need to copy. So I'm going to copy this and then go to a incognito window, which means the cookies are not set up. And you can see how this one wants me to sign in too. Okay, fine. Okay. No, you need that part. It's just that the site itself has to be visible to everybody. Yeah, so I have to make sure that part. Publish settings. That's not it. Okay, view publish site. We just try that. Site analytics. Nope. Because we are trying to control share with others. There we go. All right, so who has access? Draft. Specific people can edit. Publish. Anyone. Okay, that's the problem. So the second line is the problem because, even though it is published, only people at the Los Rios Community College District can find and view. Okay, but you can change that if this is what you want to do, is to use the school account for this purpose. So if you change it to everybody can view, then that problem will go away. So you can go here and change it to the first item here. So assuming, the only reason why we got this default setting, within Los Rios is, just for by default, there's some protection, so that people on the general internet cannot find our stuff. Okay, so that's what we can do. Okay, save. All right, so when that is done, I can now switch back to my app again, go back, continue again, and now it works. Except, it doesn't fit the entire screen because it's too wide. But other than that, it really is a large font that it's using for the title.
Now did it just resize that?
Huh? Yeah. Yeah, because it's too wide. The font is too big. But I can't zoom either. Now, let's try the links here. So let's see if we can go to home. It does go to home because I did not disallow that. Yep. So are there any questions about this demonstration? It's a very quick and inexpensive way for you to create content that is not attached to the app itself. It is actually sitting somewhere on the web. It's free, okay? If you don't like the layout, there are many options, to choose how you want to lay out your screen or your page on Google Sites. Has anyone used Google Sites? No? Okay.
Yeah, back like the Blogspot days.
Yeah. But it's a Yeah, but it's a cheap and quick and easy way to do things. And you can have like many different websites also. And then with this one, it's free. You do not need to register a domain name, okay, unless you want to also have a web presence. But if your only use of this resource is really just to have some content that you can change dynamically, like news items, okay? Yeah, exactly. So if you're, okay, let's say I am actually going ahead to do this mind defrag thing, okay? So every time, every day if I discover something kind of cool, like, how people can stay calm, I might just, put a little update here. So people can just go here and check, okay, what is new today? Like a notification, like a new item. You can also hook it up to WordPress. I mean, you can have a WordPress site or WordPress presence, and then hook up your app and have one button that goes to your blog, okay, that updates every single day or something like that. Okay, so are there any questions about how to use a web viewer? This is a web viewer. No questions? Okay. Yeah, you can, if you know how to do server side, back end type of programming, and you know how to do some front end stuff, you can actually use JavaScript, like client side JavaScript, because even though this is a limited browser, it still runs JavaScript. So if you know JavaScript and you know how to use Ajax so that your page can interact with the backend, you can actually get quite a bit of stuff done, just by using the web interface. So that opens up, some possibilities. So are we good here? Okay, all right. So, but sometimes you might have some stuff that you want to put onto the web, but it is not something that is viewable, by a person. Okay, for instance, for two of you, using wanting to do a D&D, tracking. Okay, so you might want to say, oh, I want to create an updated version of the characters. Okay, and I want to make it available on the web so I can dynamically update all my stuff, in the app. Okay, so let's say that's the case. So in that case, what you need to do is to have some kind of a web account. Okay, I'm going to sign in to my Power Server account. Okay. And you just need a web presence, somewhere. I'm looking for a particular file that generates a JSON format. I may not have that here. Okay. I got too many scripts, so I have to find out which one is the one that I want.
Is that looking inside the file?
Huh?
Is that
Yes, yeah, grep actually looks into the file. Yeah, it's a really good utility tool. But basically, okay, so the idea is you can actually create a file on the server side that you can refer to on the client side, using a web component, not a web viewer component, but a web component. So they're two different things. Okay, so so what I want to do is I'm actually trying to find an example that I had done in the past already, and see if that's the one. Text CSV. Okay, so that's one. Okay, so you can use a text CSV as a type. But if you look up the HTTP standard, the type can also be a JSON format. So I just want to give you an idea of how to do that. There we go. JSON request with a JSON body, but we want a response with a JSON body. Okay, application JSON is what we want. Okay. Copy that to data 2. Now this is more advanced stuff. I'm not. You don't have to know this, okay? But if you want to understand, how to do this part here. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm writing a script on the server side, and I'm intentionally changing the header of the response to be application/JSON. This is how a server can reply back to a client and say what kind of a response it is. Normally, what you get is an HTML document. So the server will basically reply back to your web server and say, hey, this is something that would look nice on a web server, web browser, render it, okay? But you can also specify something like this, where it just goes back and go like, well, what I'm responding with is something that doesn't look good at all, okay? This is not intended for a person to look at. This is more like just a JSON file, JSON file. So in that case, the content of your file is going to be, what I have here, those are CSV or comma separated value. Go ahead.
This is where you were saying that like we could store a character,
Yeah.
and then we just get the data from it instead of storing it in the app.
Yep. So I'm just going to give you an example. Okay. So we'll change the delimiter to single quotes because I'll need double quotes, inside the JSON format. So, yeah, go ahead.
Theoretically, you could have your web page also read the same source, so you could have one source like with all your information in it, and then your web page would look different, be built different, but displayed differently. And your app reads the same source, but it's like an app. It's like an app made so it can look a little different too, right?
Not quite
Instead
getting.
of having your app frame a web page.
Okay.
I'm not saying you could. You think it's a waste of time, or
No. I'm not understanding what you're proposing to do.
like having an app sometimes just display a web page, right? Can cause issues, or it's not as well designed, right? It's from a design point of view, you design a web page different than an app, different than the screen size and all that stuff, right? Touch screen, you should design
Possibly.
for each case, right? Mobile first design, or whatever you want to do, right? So if you were to do that, but you want to read the same data, the same ability score, or whatever, right? You could build your web page that reads the same.
Yeah. Okay, I see what you mean. Yep. But what I'm doing here is really, now this file can be on its own, it doesn't even have to be coming from a script. But I'm making it coming from a script, which is data2. And I just want to test it here. Okay, so we go to the web browser, and then we just go to the Power Server, go to My Account, and we look for data2.pl, which is Perl. So it only comes back. Oh, okay. The problem is the \n. It is not escaped as a new line because I use single quotes. This is Perl, so it behaves slightly differently compared to other languages. Okay. So with that adjusted, now it just replies that, which is, this is basically the JSON format of two lists. There's an overall list which has two items. The first item itself is a list of 3 numbers, 1, 2, and 3. And then the second item of the overall list is 4, 5, and 6, which is a second list. So it's a nested list. So what we want to do is to say, can we read this back from our app and read it and decipher as a JSON string? Okay. So we'll go ahead and change our program a little bit now. Okay. And so we'll have a third screen. Okay, so I'm going to make a new screen again. So the third screen is read JSON. Okay, and I'm just going to hijack. Huh? Yep. So I'm going to go back to screen 1, change the block so that we switch to the third screen that we just created. It's basically just a test. So I'm using this as a test platform. So there we go. And it's called Screen Read JSON. Screen Read JSON. There we go. So that part is done. We now need to go to Read JSON and see how we can actually do it. The first thing you need to do is to go to the designer. But this time you don't want to have a web viewer. You want to go to connectivity and then get a web component instead. So when you drag a web component into a screen, it doesn't go into the screen itself because it is not a visible, it's a non-visible component. So that's why it doesn't go into the screen itself. So if it's non-visible, what is it good for? Now you can also look at the properties of a web component. You might want to click on allow cookies depending on what you're going to do with a web component. If you turn on allow cookies, that means you can have transactions being done behind the scene that is not visible to the end user that would actually need cookies to maintain the concept of a session. Okay, So in general, that's a good thing to have. Response file name and response, you don't need to predetermine any one of these. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just do something over here. So in order to trigger the operation, I'm just going to put a single button here. Okay, it's not going to be fancy, and we'll just go ahead and label the button and say read JSON content from the web. Okay, and then we go to blocks. Oh, we'll need one more thing. We'll need a label to report back what we have read. Okay, so we want a label here to report back. And then we go to blocks, and then we go to the button, which is where the action is triggered. Okay, so when button 1 is clicked, this is what we want to do. So now we go to the web1 component and ask, what can it possibly do? So the purple blocks are the things that it can do. Okay, when you see call, those are the things they can do. So let's go through all this list here. Build request data, we don't need to do that because this is not going to be a request that has parameterized that has parameters, so you don't need to do this. This is very useful when you deal with APIs. Okay, but in this case, my script is very simple. It does not require any parameters. Clear cookies, obviously, that tells you what it's supposed to do. Okay, so if you want to start a new session, you don't want to maintain the old session data, you can clear the cookies. Delete. What is it? I think it's deleting the current response. You can double check. Oh, it's a delete request to a server, which is seldom used on a HTTP request. Get is something that we want to do. Okay, so a get is a simple one. Every time you click on something on the URL line, you type something, you press the enter key. That's usually a get request. Okay, so this is how a website or web server understands and go like, oh, you want this information or you want this document or whatever. But the interesting thing is this one is kind of interesting because it comes back like right away. So how do you know what is the content that I have just requested? So there are two things you can do. If the save response property is true, the response will be saved in the file, and then the got file event will be triggered when the file is done saving the content. On the other hand, if that is turned off, then got text event will be triggered. So the only question is, are you expecting a lot of stuff? If you're expecting a lot of stuff, you want to save it to a file and then read it from the file. If you're expecting something simple, like a very simple object in JSON, then you can basically turn off the save response property, and instead it will trigger an event called got text. Okay, so we'll turn off save response to be sure in this case as an example. So we'll go to the web component again, and we turn off save response is already off. Okay, go back to blogs, go back to web component, and we want to perform a get operation. Now, before you do the get operation, you have to say, where are we going? What is our URL? So once again, we go to the web component, and this time we have to make sure that we set it correctly. So after all the gets, you can see how we can control the URL. This is how we specify the URL, which is going to be just text. Okay, so what I need to do now is to copy this URL, Control C, and then go back to App Inventor and do a Control V over here. So now we have the URL saved here. Now, if you already know the parameters to a URL, you can specify that too. You can specify question mark, parameter, blah blah blah, equals blah blah blah, ampersand, and so on and so forth. So you can actually do that too if you want to. So these two blocks here, the first one doesn't do a single thing other than saying, oh, the next request is going to that particular URL. The second block, which is called web1.get, is actually going to send the request out onto the internet, go to the server and say, well, when we get something back, we are going to have a second event called getText. Okay. So I'm going to do one more thing here. So I'm going to go to the screen itself, and I'm going to change the screen color to something that's not very nice.
Not very what?
Not very nice. I'm going to change the background color of the screen right after the get to something that you probably don't want to use. Let's pick some yucky one, like this apple green. There we go. Okay, so the reason I'm doing this because I want to show you the sequence of things happening. Okay, so after the get block, it doesn't actually wait until the request comes back, and it immediately moves on to the next block. Okay, so in programming terms, it is called asynchronous. Basically, you're sending out the request, and you are not waiting for the response, and you immediately move on to whatever is next to it.
Why would you do that?
Because you don't want to busy wait. Because if you're busy waiting, then you're chewing up your processing cycles, and there can potentially be other things that you could do.
So like if you have like a big file or something, not for your case of specific numbers.
Well, either one, because the request depends on how fast the routers are, whether the web traffic is heavy or not. So even though it's only like 6 items in 2 lists inside a bigger list, it can still take like 50 milliseconds or more, depending on. I mean, it depends on your network connection, your Wi-Fi speed, and all kinds of other things. Okay, so the next question now is, well, if we don't know when it's going to be coming back, then how do we process the response that we're getting back from that site? Namely the JSON representation of those 6 numbers. When are we going to process that? How do we know when we actually get that? Well, when you go to the web component, it has got quite a few 2 events. One is got file, which we know we are not going to use because we said do not save the response. So this is what we're going to get. Now this block here, or this particular event, is triggered whenever a request has a response coming back and we are finished receiving the response. Okay, so it's got parameters. You can process each and every single one of these. Okay, URL is just going to be whatever this URL was, and you go like, but why do we need a URL? Because you might have placed multiple GET requests from different triggers and already. And the way the responses are coming back may be out of order. You have no idea. Let's say you have 4 requests placed already. Okay, one is because of a click of an end user. One is because of a geolocation change. One is because of a time event, and the last one is because of some other reason. Okay, but it's not user initiated. Okay, so you have 4 GET requests sent out already, and something came back. How do you know which one came back? This is the only thing you can use to track. Oh, so this is the response of that request. Okay, so that's why the URL is kind of important, because it can tell you this is the response of which pending request or which pending response. Response code is a number. Okay, it's just a number. The most famous number is 404, not found. You're putting the wrong URL. Okay, which 404 by coincidentally is also the room number of my office. So people can say, where's your office? Not found. Oh, wait, it's room 404. Yeah. Okay, response type is JSON this time, okay, because we specifically program it to say, application/JSON. Otherwise, the normal type would be HTML document. Response content would be that string, okay? So, yeah, go ahead.
So like you were saying, if you have like 4 requests, you need a
Conditional statement.
I mean, for each request, do you need a separate web component, and then you call web 1? That's what you're referring to, right?
Yep. You can use a single web component to do all of this.
Okay.
You can. It's just that you have to track which one is coming back from where.
What you asked.
What you asked exactly. This is the answer of which question.
All right.
Now you can also have multiple web components if you want to make your life easier, but I think that might be slightly heavier in terms of resource use because you actually have multiple components or multiple objects in that case. So that's another option if you don't want to track it like this, is to have multiple web components. Okay. So are we good so far with all this stuff? Good. All right. So if I want to save a lot of trouble and just go like yeah, I think we are good. Okay, then we can go to label one and to basically to display the answer. But the way we display the answer is not just to go to the response code. So what we'll do is we'll go to label one and then we change the text of label one to, okay, come on, move. There we go. And remember we need make JSON. So we'll put make JSON here. So what we're doing is we're doing several, we're going through a few steps to make sure that whatever we're getting back is a list, is a JSON representation. So we'll set this text to make JSON, and then the thing we're making JSON out of is the decoded version of the string that we have received. So now we go to, yep, to double check, right? So we call the JSON text decode. Move this out. This is why graphical programming can be kind of troublesome because it's things get just wider and wider and wider. Okay, so the JSON text is going to be the response content because that's actually what we have received. Okay, so sorry?
Basically the body of a header.
It is not the body of the header. This is the body of the response.
Isn't that the same thing?
No, this is the actual body of the response, not the header. The header tells you what it is. So response type and response code would be in the header, but the body of the response is actually the text that we want to get.
Okay, I think I'm thinking that. That's what I was thinking. But
Okay.
I was calling it.
It's okay, no problem. So I'm just double checking. Okay, this is the string. Okay, with all the open brackets and 1, 2, 3, and then the other nested open brackets. This is going to convert it back into a list of 2 items, of which each item is a list itself that has 3 additional items. This is turning that list back into a string, and this is how we display it. Okay, so if everything works out, it would seem that, hey, what is the big deal? This is just showing the string that we just got. Okay, if it doesn't work, then we'll see that thing in double quotes because it doesn't decode correctly or something like that. Okay, all right, so we'll give it a try. Okay, so I think we got everything ready. But this is how you can, if you're doing a D&D character thing, you can basically update your characters using this particular technique. So every time you start up the app, you can either optionally or automatically go onto the web and look for the latest updates of your characters and incorporate that into the local database. Okay? And we'll talk about how to save all of this stuff locally too. But right now we are more focused on just getting it from the web first. Okay, we replace that. Go back to the command line, and then I have to figure out which one is going to do the upload. Okay, we check the devices are still here, and that's just a screenshot. Okay. There we go. All right. So now we switch back to the app. Oh, the other finger. Nope. There we go. Mind defrag. Continue. So this time it goes to this screen here. Oh, I forgot to change the color back when we got the text, so it's going to stay as the yucky apple green now. Okay, problem with application. Cannot find the component screen 1. Okay. So you're already there. Okay. So it's the web component.
No, it's the your actual block, make JSON, the giant block that you have
Oh, okay.
down in the list part. You
Block,
have
block, block.
set screen
Shut, shut, shut.
down towards the bottom.
Okay.
So that's a reference to screen
Couple
1.
questions.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we can just disable or get rid of this block. Disable.
Block 4?
It's really just for kind of reporting back. The
So you don't need it?
yeah, don't need it. Let me double check.
So it's setting the title to the JSON
Yeah.
file is actually anything other than just setting the title. So
Yep.
I just did it.
Yep. Yeah. Question?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No.
I did.
Oh, yeah.
So you get this make JSON file from the one you put on Canvas.
Yeah.
And then so do I open that and then drag it into my backpack?
Yeah.
To use it at
Yeah. So your backpack is really kind of cool because it persists across projects, but it also persists across sessions. So you can do something on Monday, you put it into the backpack.
Yeah.
4 days later, you reconnect to App Inventor. It's still in your backpack.
Here's your backpack.
Yeah. The concept of a backpack is kind of interesting.
How much stuff is actually in it?
There's things in
Yeah, it's just things.
I don't like how you can't collapse the block.
Yeah, right. Even when there's nothing in it, right? Or I don't, is it closed when nothing's in it?
No, it's
Right.
like that make JSON file. I have thing. For some reason I have 2 in there, so I have to scroll past both of them before.
Yep.
Yeah. Before I get to some of the new. Should have like a naming method and name like a
They should
collapse
just automatically
form.
collapse it so it's
But if it just
You
one
could
line,
drag it out.
and yeah, but it could collapse into something where you have a bunch of files with the same first part of the block. So that's why I'm thinking like collapse it into another.
Look at the apple green. Yes.
subfolder that you name.
So your backpack,
Mhm.
when you go out of the session and
Mhm.
you come back,
This
come
backpack
back
still
to
has
your
what it has.
It's associated
it
to your
stays there.
username.
Okay.
So it doesn't even matter what IP or what computer you're on. It's
Yeah.
just associated to your Google account.
Yep, which is really cool because now you can move things across all of your projects.
Yeah,
Yep.
Does it take a lot of space?
Not on your computer.
Oh.
So this is how you can get the list. We know it works because I think the spacing is different from the original string. If it were the original string, we would have seen double quotes across the entire thing as well. So we know this is actually created by make.json, which also means whatever was fed to make.json was in fact a list that looks like this. The structure is like this, but that can only be constructed because of JSON decode by reading the content on the server. So this is another way to utilize a web resource. For those of you who want to kind of keep things updated, now once you have this on the server, on your client, on your app, okay. The next question is, I might want to save a local version of this, okay, just in case there's no web access. I still want the end user to be able to utilize the existing version of all the characters in the D&D game. So the question now is, how do we save all this stuff locally? So that one, you got several options. So to save something locally, you go to storage, okay? And you got a few options. You can use files, okay? So if you click on files, it says, this is a non-visible component for storing and retrieving files. Use this component to read or write files on your device. The default behavior is to write files to the private data directory associated with the app, blah, 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 blah. So it's a very general type of component where you can read a file. You can also write to a file, text file, and also graphic stuff. So that's one. TinyDB is the other one. I'm going to skip Fusion tables because Fusion table is also a web resource. So if you lose internet connection, you cannot access your Fusion table. And Fusion tables, I think, is outdated by now. Okay, Google no longer supports Fusion table. I need to move the screen because the help bubble goes all the way to the top. There we go. So TinyDB is really cool. Okay, the text is kind of long, but what TinyDB really is a persistent per device type of key value pair storage system. Okay, that's the best way I can describe it. So if you want to store something that is persistent, which means you exit the app, you reset the device, and it's still there. Okay, that's what I meant when I said persistent. So if you want to store something persistent, but you don't want to have to parse a file, again and again, this is a really cool way to do it. So the way you use TinyDB is you specify this is the key, okay, which is a string, okay, whatever you want to name the thing you want to store is the key. That's the name. And then it has a value, okay? It's key, value, key, value, key, value. The value cannot be too fancy. The value can only be a number or a string. But we know that we can use McJSON, right? So we can convert any complex thing into a string as the value corresponding to a key, okay? So if you're working with a D&D character type of lookup thing, now you can say, assuming at the top level you want to use the keys to identify the characters, now you can have Paladin, okay, as one class of D&D characters, and then associate with that a list, okay, that is a key value pair list itself to identify the health points, okay, the combat power, blah 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 blah, whatever you want to store with the characters. So you can use the web component to get an update, but then once you get the update, you store it locally. So if your web component says can't go online, there's no internet access, then you pull the local version up and go like, well, this is the last updated version, but it's better than nothing. Is that okay?
Every time you connect to the app, you download it from the web as long as you have the web.
Internet access.
And then as soon as it downloads, you can just, instead of downloading it to a file that's with your app, you just download it to the TinyDB and it will
Yep.
keep it.
Yep. Yeah. So, but keep in mind, do not store secrets in TinyDB. TinyDB is no more than an XML file that is stored at a location that's easy to find. Okay, so you definitely do not want to store anything that requires encryption into TinyDB. Okay, so no social security number, no credit card number. Okay, so other things, just kind of make the assumption that whatever you store into TinyDB is going to be viewable by other people. Okay, just make that assumption, then you'll be safer. Okay, is that okay? Well, it's supposed to be private to the app itself. So supposedly other apps cannot see it. But if a phone is rooted, then the rooted apps can definitely see it too. So I would be very careful with storing anything that requires encryption or anything that is sensitive into TinyDB. Okay, just err on the safe side. That's all I'm saying. So if there's a TinyDB, what is a TinyWebDB? Okay, I'm pretty sure some of you are asking that question because they look about the same. So the only difference is this is it communicates with a web service to store and retrieve information. Kind of the same way. It is also just key and then the value, key and the value, except this one is web based, not on a per device basis, it's on a per app basis. Okay? Let me say that one more time. TinyDB is on a per device basis, and then TinyWebDB is on a per app basis. What is the difference? Okay, big, huge difference here. So if you have two devices, okay, and you have the same app running on both of those devices, device 1 and device 2, okay, they have entirely separated TinyDBs. So you can store settings on one, and you can store settings on the other one, and they are independent. You can update one, the other one doesn't get updated. They're completely independent. It's also independent depending on the user. So you can be different users on different devices. TinyDB is specific to the device. TinyWebDB is specific to the app itself. So let's say you have two different devices belonging to two different users. Okay, they'll be accessing the same TinyWebDB. Now that means there are certain things you definitely don't want to store using TinyWebDB, like secrets, stuff like that. But one thing you want to do, if you're writing a game, the high score is something you might want to store with TinyWebDB because it is visible to every single installation of that app. Okay, and you can say, oh, today the highest score of this particular game today is this number, and the winner is this particular player.
That would only work if you do it on the web version.
It will only work on the web version.
Keep updating and then drop
Yep.
it down to every device.
Yep. So it's useful in that way, but be very careful when you use TinyWebDB because every single installation of the app is going to use the same DB. Okay? Yep. You can use both of them. They're completely independent components, so you can use one or the other or both, at the same time or none. It's entirely up to you. So TinyDB is great for things that you want to store locally, like preferences like colors, font size, and stuff like that. TinyWebDB would be things that you can potentially share with other users, but it doesn't have to be, because you can also use key value pair list to maintain like multiple users. But those would be visible to every single user as well. So you can't really track. I would strongly advise tracking personalized data using WebDB. Is that okay? All right, cool. Now, why do we want to kind of emphasize so much on security? Because it looks like hey, if the source code is not available to people, they cannot really read the source code and find the key to find other things. So if I make my key really obscure, other people cannot find it. Okay, so here's a question: if I give you an APK file, is there a way to reverse it back to the source code? It is very easy, exactly, because you can. There are many Java decompilers out there already, and the APK file really just contains Java bytecode that is already compiled. So you can just run it through a decompiler, get back the source code, and all those strings, of all the keys and whatnot, they will be easy to see. So this is why it's very important to be kind of mindful about what you're storing or what you allow the end users to store, and basically make the assumption whatever you store using TinyDB or TinyWebDB can be read by another app on the device, or in the case of WebDB, can be read by many other people. Wherever this app is installed, they can read it. Is that okay?
So,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
is it stored on your computer? Is that what they're looking at? What makes them have access to it? Where's the data actually stored
Okay, so with TinyDB, okay, I can try to navigate to show you guys. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, because this is a very minimal level of hacking, and I think everybody should know a little bit about hacking. Okay. Okay, so this is ADB shell is kind of cool because I have just opened a connection to my device. Okay, it's now whatever I do here is a Linux command, but it is applicable to the device here. Okay, so I can run Linux commands just like ls. Okay, and yeah, go ahead.
This is your phone?
This is my test phone, my
This is your
$75 phone.
Not the emulator.
Not the emulator. This is my actual test phone. Mm-hmm. So you can use mount, and you can look at how the devices are being used and stuff like that. And I think there's a data folder. Within the data folder, oh, okay, permission denied, which is good because that means, and you can do an l.l to find out as an end user what you have access to. So I'm looking for something where it is at least readable by everybody. Nope, that's the whole thing about rooting a device. Okay, so that's a good question. Okay, so the question is, can't I just elevate myself to an administrator permission so I can have access to everything?
This is your phone. Right?
It is my phone, but I have not rooted the phone. So a non-rooted device does not give you root access. So even though you pay for and you own the device, you can still only have end user access, to the stuff. You're still a guest, exactly. But in the case of an iOS device, you don't even get to this level. Apple Store can remotely remove apps that you have already paid for and installed on your iPhone.
You make it sound like that's a bad thing. What is advantages to it?
For them,
Well, I mean, like, so people can't get to it,
You can still
Laziness is underrated.
You can still
Okay, excuse me, we're not done yet? Yep. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm looking through all these permissions here. So each app actually has its own folder, which I cannot access anymore. And at the root level, you can basically, okay, so let me go back to that screen here. Okay, so this is a very quick introduction to Linux stuff. Okay. Tombstones is okay, so let's go there. It's a symlink though, so. Oh, okay. And I have no access once. We have no access once we get there. Okay, so we can actually see the system is fairly well protected. I can't really get much out of this. It's worth a shot. That's right. Yeah, so what we're looking for is something that has RWX, as the last three characters, or at least R, something X as the last few characters.
On your SIM card, your fake SIM card, you could do it.
Yeah.
SD card, not SIM card.
Yeah, you can. I think that the default emulator may not have these protections, and that's why I was able to do it in previous classes. But since this is a fairly updated device with the latest firmware, so it's better protected. Yep. So anyway, but each app basically has its own user, and it has its own folder where it has only permissions to itself. So under a normal in a normal device where it's not rooted, apps cannot see each other's folders, which is good. And then the end user cannot really see the folders either. So you kind of have a few levels of protection. But once a device is rooted, then the end user can see everything because you have root access. So you can actually see every single folder and every single file. And depending on the device, the rooting process can be simple. It can also be complicated, can also be impossible. There are such things. There are single button root applications. Yep, there are apps like that, but only for certain devices.
Yeah.
It also depends on what device you're dealing with. If you're getting a Samsung, good luck, because Samsung is almost like Apple. They're very very protective of their devices. They don't let people root their devices easily. If you're using a Google phone, on the other hand, it's relatively easy to root because Google says, hey, you buy the device, it's yours. As long as they can still generate revenue by advertisements and whatnot, hey, it's all good.
It's less mainstream.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So we are running out of time. I am going to stop the lecture here. Nope, it's all good. I mean, we are just learning a few different things, and I'll stop.